Good morning, everyone. My name is Charles Allen. I'm the Ward 6 council member and chair of the council's Committee on Transportation and the Environment. Today is Monday, June 16th, 2025, and we are meeting both in room 120 of the historic John A. Wilson building as well as on the Zoom virtual platform. The time is now 10:03 a.m., and I'm calling to order this performance oversight hearing, budget hearing of the committee. This is the committee's last budget oversight hearing on the mayor's proposed budget for fiscal year 2026. Today, the committee will receive testimony from both public and government witnesses regarding the Department of Motor Vehicles, or the DMV. The mission of the DMV is to promote the safe operation of motor vehicles and public safety while providing outstanding customer service. Every day, the DMV serves an average of 3,200 district residents and non-residents, more than almost any district government agency. The mayor's proposed FY26 operating budget for the agency is $70.8 million, representing a 2.2% decrease from its FY25 approved budget of $72.4 million. The funding supports about 327 FTEs, a decrease of roughly 5.5 FTEs supported in the FY25 budget. The DMV's proposed capital budget is $12.8 million, representing a 300% increase from its FY25 approved capital budget of $3.2 million. The capital budget does not support any FTEs. The committee will accept written testimony through the council's hearing management system at lims.dccouncil.gov/hearings through Friday, June 20th, 2025. That's the end of this week. So any other testimony, please get that in because we move to committee markups next week. To submit testimony, please be sure to navigate to the hearing page for the June 16th hearing. We do have 3 public witnesses that had signed up to testify. Following our public panel, we'll then turn to Director Robinson for his testimony. But let me go ahead and call up our public witnesses now, who are both joining in person as well as online. I've got Helena Roisman, who's with DC Families for Safe Streets, who's joining us virtually online. Deborah Ogaro, a public witness, and Tom Wright, public witness, who's joining us here in person. So Mr. Wright, if you'll come up to the table at this point. We've got Ms. Roisman, who's online. All right, I don't see Deborah Ogaro here yet, but in case Ms. Ogaro joins us, we'll bring her up. Ms. Roisman, why don't I turn to you to start, and then Mr. Wright, I'll turn to you right after that. Good morning, when you're ready.
Good morning. Thank you so much. My name is Helena Roisman, and I'm testifying on behalf of the DC chapter of Families for Safe Streets. We are an organization of individuals who have either lost a loved one due to a traffic crash or who have been seriously injured. We acknowledge how critical budget decisions are in uncertain and declining revenue environments like the one we are currently experiencing. We also recognize that budgets reflect values. We expect DC budgets to reflect the district's prioritization for safety for all road users, consistent with Move DC and other visioning and planning efforts that reflect extensive investment in public involvement and your constituents' input. Now is the time to commit funding and put words on paper into action. We are here to urge the protection for existing and additional funding for the Strengthening Traffic Enforcement Education and Responsibility, otherwise known as STEER Amendment Act of 2024. We thank the Council for taking action last year to pass and fund key provisions of the STEER Act. In this budget hearings last year, we testified prioritizing funding 2 key provisions that would have the most impact. 1, time staff at the Office of the Attorney General to pursue reckless drivers, and 2, the Department of Motor Vehicles' implementation of the Intelligent Speed Assistance Program for anyone convicted of criminal reckless driving. We are now emphasizing our desire to make sure these funds are protected throughout the budget negotiations. While reciprocity remains our ultimate goal, the STEER Act gave the Office of the Attorney General the new authority to bring civil suits against vehicles and their drivers who have large unpaid traffic fines. We applaud this focus on the most reckless drivers who need to be held accountable. In February, the OAG issued 3 civil enforcement actions against 3 Maryland drivers who collectively incurred 226 infractions for speeding, among other citations on DC streets. One of those drivers struck a child in a crosswalk, and they collectively failed to pay $90,000 in fines for dangerous driving. And in April, the OAG issued lawsuits against 5 drivers from Maryland and Virginia who collectively had 957 citations for speeding, plus additional dangerous traffic infractions. totaling $425,000 in unpaid fines, penalties, and fees. This small investment for OAG staff time will pay dividends by ensuring that our streets are safe for all and building public trust when the district demonstrates its willingness to protect its residents. The STEER Act's Intelligent Speed Assistance Program was the most costly provision to fund. As we said last year, this program will have the greatest impact because the technology enables safe driving speeds while allowing convicted reckless drivers to still have access to their vehicles. We are exceptionally proud of the District of Columbia for being the first in the country to create this type of program, sparking inspiration and serving as a model for similar legislation that recently passed in Virginia, Georgia, and Washington state, and legislation that was under consideration in Maryland. We look forward to following the implementation of the district's program and are encouraged by the growing regional approach to ensure that our streets are safe for all. These are additional parts. There are different additional parts of the STEER Act that still need funding, such as the creation of the new point system focused on priority booting and towing for vehicles with repeat violations, and for the Department of Motor Vehicles to develop a safe driving course to waive the cost of fines upon course completion. DC Families for Safe Streets is focused on the ways to prioritize addressing the most reckless drivers on DC streets, who repeatedly threaten residents and visitors with their vehicles and who have until now been able to do so with impunity. The new point system will provide the framework for the removal of the vehicles with repeat violations, regardless of whether fines are paid or unpaid. This neutralizes the concerns that those with the ability to pay get a free pass. It requires accountability for all reckless drivers and ultimately benefits all road users.
Ms. Roisman, apologize. I think you might have accidentally hit the mute button because it just muted. We could hear you if
So
everything
sorry.
just started 5 or 10 seconds ago.
The council should preserve funding for the funded portions of the STEER Act, OAG staff time, and the ISA program, and we hope additional funding can be found for the point system and safe driving course. Nearly 40% of DC households do not own cars, and people who walk, bike, and take transit in DC disproportionately pay in terms of being victims of fatal crashes, medical bills for their injuries, and a transportation tax time. Especially in the current challenging budget environment, these programs represent smart fiscal opportunities that can benefit our city both financially and in terms of public safety. These provisions have strong potential to be revenue positive, not merely cost drivers. The Attorney General's civil enforcement actions demonstrate the promising financial return on this modest investment. Additionally, the new point system for priority booting, towing of repeat violators needs to be implemented more efficiently to realize its revenue potential. When unsafe drivers demonstrate they cannot operate their vehicles responsibly, we need a streamlined process to remove these vehicles from our streets and directly recoup fines owned by these dangerous drivers through vehicle seizure, auction, or selling for scrap. This approach not only improves public safety, but creates a clear pathway for cost recovery while addressing the most reckless offenders. And we have submitted this, so feel free to go over the submitted version and come to us with any questions. Various members in our group would be more than happy to respond. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ms. Roisman. If you can hang in there for a moment, I have a couple other witnesses, and then I'll turn to you for some questions. Turn next to Tom Wright, who's with us in person here. And let me just note, we also were joined by Jessica Streeter-Elting, who's joining us online. So after Mr. Wright, I'll turn to Jessica Streeter-Elting. Mr. Wright, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman Allen, and thank you for the opportunity to share my experience today. My name is Tom Wright, and I'm immensely fortunate to be here speaking with you all. On December 7, 2023, I was involved in a pedestrian accident. At the time, I was a senior official in the White House at the National Security Council. I was on my way home from work at approximately 9:30 p.m. in the evening. I got to a pedestrian crossing at Fulton and Massachusetts Avenue, which is about a 5-minute walk from where I live. That's all I remember about that evening, but there was a witness to what happened next and a video from a passing Tesla. I waited for a car to stop to let me cross. A car stopped and I began to walk across the crossing and acknowledged the driver with a wave of my hand. Another car, unfortunately, kept going and struck me. According to the witness, who was the passenger in the stop car, I was thrown 20 feet in the air. I had 2 skull fractures, 5 facial fractures, a smashed shoulder, numerous other injuries, but most seriously of all, significant bleeding on the brain. On the Glasgow Coma scale of head trauma, I was a 5, which meant I had approximately a 20% chance of survival and recovery. I was exceptionally lucky in the neurological care I received, first and foremost from the extraordinary medical staff at George Washington Hospital. The White House physician, who had significant experience in dealing with head trauma as a doctor for the military, also got involved. Without all of this expertise and support, I doubt I would have recovered or even survived. The driver who hit me had at least 10 previous traffic violations, including for reckless driving and driving while on a suspended license. His license was suspended at least twice, including for 3 months earlier in 2023. The police issued a criminal warrant, but the DC Attorney General chose not to pursue it. I filed a FOIA request, and the file stated there was a lack of evidence, although it did acknowledge there was a witness in a video. And I have no reason to believe the driver is not back out driving on the streets. I am fully aware how fortunate I was to survive my accident, and I do not want to see others have to go through what I experienced. Therefore, I strongly endorse the request to fully fund the Steer Amendment Act of 2024. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wright. And so sorry to hear about that collision. I don't like to use the word accident when describing this, but use the word collision there. I know you have to leave by 10:45, but if you're able to stick around for a couple of minutes, I have a couple of questions. All right, let me turn to our last public witness, Jessica Streeter-Elting, who's here on the Zoom platform. So let me turn to you. Good morning.
Thank you so much. So my name is Jessica Streeter-Elting, and I'm speaking today as a 20-year resident of the District of Columbia and somebody who's been personally impacted by a reckless driver. On June 12th, 2024, just over a year ago, I stepped out of my office during a hectic day to drop a package at the post office and pick up lunch. While I made it to the post office, I never made it to that lunch. As I crossed Pennsylvania Avenue at 12th Street in the crosswalk, with the signal illuminated, I was struck by a Maryland driver turning left from 12th Street onto Pennsylvania. She says she saw me, but could never articulate why she didn't stop. With 8 current outstanding vehicular tickets in DC alone, totaling thousands of dollars, the accident simply served to add to the count. She was cited and issued a fine for being uninsured and for hitting a pedestrian, and then allowed to go along with her day. Meanwhile, I was taken via ambulance to GW Hospital with a head laceration, a moderate level traumatic brain injury, including bleeding on my brain, a fractured pelvis and lower back, a broken titanium rod on my spine from a previous surgery, and a myriad of other issues. To this day, I cannot tell you anything about the first 2 weeks due to memory loss, other than everything hurt and I was not myself. But my colleagues could tell you the fear they felt as they searched for a team member who never returned to the office. And my spouse and children could tell you how life at home shifted to accommodate a partner and parent who could no longer participate in regular day-to-day life. The path to recovery has been long and challenging, but I know I'm incredibly lucky to be able to sit here today and speak to you all. I'm grateful to see the passage of the STEER Act last year, and I'm asking for continued and increased funding. I know there are so many priorities in the budget, and I say this as a parent of young children who attend DC schools and again as a resident, but I see these funds as a way to both keep the protection of our local residents, of those who work here, and our visitors, and an investment in all of our safety and security in a way that benefits all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Elting. Thank you all very much for your testimony, and hearing about these collisions, these injuries, and as catastrophic as they are, knowing that you're actually on the lucky side of that collision as well, because we know with the sheer number of people who have been killed, what could have happened. I really appreciate you all taking the time to come down here and share that. I know it's not easy, because even describing it will be a little bit of reliving it. And so I just want to acknowledge that and appreciate you for doing that. It's also part of hearing so many stories, and I have shared this before. I have had, unfortunately, more than one close friend killed on the streets of DC with traffic violence that were in a crosswalk in the right, and a dangerous or distracted driver killed him. And so it is very personal to me, and it's why I wrote and passed the STEER Act, because we've got to do a lot better. And describing situations where, you know, someone has multiple dangerous driving violations, reckless driving violations, and it, it is a flip of the presumption that we unfortunately have. Driving is not a right, it is a privilege. And if someone cannot do it and shows us over and over and over again that they are dangerous in doing it, they should not be on our streets. And I am perfectly fine being pretty strong about that. Um, that's just not the way it's supposed to work. And I think we have to collectively, we all have to do better, um, to really describe what these are and then take the action. It is also challenging, I think, because the city is structured a little bit in silos, not necessarily intentionally, just the nature of government sometimes is that different entities will have different aspects of it. So we're here today with the DMV hearing. Obviously, the DMV is not going to be the agency that writes the ticket or decides whether to prosecute somebody. There's a lot of elements that are outside the realm of the DMV, but then the DMV is an important partner in this when we think about our intelligent speed assistance or being able to work on individual licensing or renewal. Or as an agency, then working in partnership with all those other agencies. So I know some of what you talked about is beyond the DMV's scope, but it does highlight why we're here with the DMV, and then partnering with the director and the agency to think about what are the pieces where they can help move that. I also think, you know, when the administration eliminated the deputy mayor for operations and infrastructure, and so now some of these functions are within the city administrator's office. I think in theory, the idea is that this allows the CA's office, the city administrator, to kind of look across all the agencies. But it also is very opaque to me as to who exactly is marshaling all the different resources to get this done. Ms. Roisman, you talked specifically about the funding. I just want to let you know we're going to be following up with the director on the different funding aspects for the intelligent speed assistance. I know that, and I think the director is going to share this in his testimony, that they've got the proposed rulemaking out for that program. Ms. Roisman, have you had a chance to take a look at that proposed rulemaking, or has your organization had a chance, Families for Safe Streets, to review it or give feedback?
I am not certain, but I'm happy to find out and get back to you.
Okay. We can certainly follow up with the director too when he comes up, but that is something where I want to see this rulemaking go through as quickly as possible because we funded this. We're about to be in the fourth quarter of this fiscal year, and I want to get going as fast as we can. And again, I know there's folks at the DMV want to get this going too, but sometimes the pace of government just feels frustrating, moving slow. Mr. Wright, thank you also for sharing the specifics of what happened for you. Perhaps here, or if you'd rather afterwards, I would like to better understand what happened with a warrant being issued, but OAG not prosecuting. There may be facts of this that I don't know and benefit from hearing from the OAG themselves, but anything that they shared with you about their choice of why not to prosecute?
No, we had been in touch with the inspector or police officer responsible for the investigation, and they told us that they were recommending criminal charges and had issued a warrant. And then they told us that the AG had decided not to pursue it.
Okay.
At that point, I filed a FOIA request just for more information. You know, they don't share, I think, deliberative elements of it, but they did say there wasn't enough evidence, but that seemed contradicted by the file, which sort of indicated, you know, the witness testimony, which is in the police report. And I think there was one video. I think they were trying to get a second, but that was unsuccessful. So it seemed relatively clear cut, but they said it was because of lack of evidence. But we have had no, we have not sought sort of interaction with that office or heard from them. Yeah.
Okay. We could follow up after the hearing if I can try to help. I mean,
Sure.
I agree. And this isn't just our OAG, this is gonna be most prosecutorial bodies aren't and probably can't share deliberative matters around when they move. And I know certainly when we see, be it the U.S. Attorney's Office or OAG, when we when we see what's called no papering, meaning that MPD might say, hey, I want to make the arrest. The standard that the prosecutors have is a different one because they can only move forward the case they believe that they can win, that they have the evidence. And so that may be what's going on here, but I'm happy to work with you afterwards to just make sure you feel a sense of understanding that decision. I'd also want them, though, to make sure that we explore every other opportunity here. If this person has dangerous driving, operating on a suspended license, there might be other mechanisms by which the OAG can go after a driver like that to get them off the roads if they are clearly putting people at risk. So would love to follow up with you after the hearing to see what we can do in that regard. And to Ms. Elting, again, similar to Mr. Wright, I know sharing what happened to you is very difficult. So I appreciate you sharing it with us. It's hard to hear, but it's important for us to be able to hear that. And I think in your situation, you said that person had, again, multiple outstanding tickets and citations, thousands of dollars. And I'd like to follow up with the OAG's office as well to see what actions they might be able to take for that driver if they're identified like this. There may be things other than the criminal prosecution for that exact collision. As much as I would like for that to happen, there may be other routes that they can take. I think it was Miss Roisman who kind of brought up what happened. It happened in Ward 6 where a young girl was just crossing the street with a walk signal from school, headed up to the library. And a driver who was actually second in line at the red light just couldn't be bothered to wait. And so zipped around a car, sped through the intersection, struck the girl. Fortunately, she survived, but bones in her feet were broken. She was bruised, had tire marks on her leg. And of course, this guy had the audacity to get out and start yelling at her that she had walked into his car, even though she had the walk signal and he clearly had struck her. At the end of that interaction right there, he was sent on his way. He was given a ticket by MPD and he left the scene driving his own vehicle. I talked with the commander for MPD for the first district there and expressed my pretty strong frustration about how that interaction went. And to his credit, they actually then went, sent detectives, and then ended up bringing criminal charges. And then, of course, the attorney general then did their work. And so this individual now in the state of Maryland is facing a lot of serious consequences. And I think that's part of what has to happen for drivers to not feel like they don't have to stop. They don't have to care. We've got to have these different tools. And again, I know we're at the DMV hearing, so some of this is partnering with DMV, some of this is working with the other agencies, but it is going to take all of us pushing together and collaboratively to be able to make the changes that we need to see. So I really appreciate you all speaking this. We're going to be working on our side around the budget to see what, we've got a couple elements of the STEER Act that still need to be funded so that it can be implemented. And, one of the core elements of the STEER Act is trying to reverse this idea that as long as I can just pay the ticket, I'm somehow a good driver. And so we oftentimes focus on the unpaid citations and violations. But if I've got 20 speeding tickets and I just happen to be in a position where I could write a check for each one of them, I'm not a safer driver because I could write the check. And I think that's the idea behind the STEER Act is let's really focus on better behavior, safer driving, and holding everybody accountable, not just if you have a pocketbook that can afford the ticket. And so we're going to continue to partner with DMV to work on implementing these pieces. And rest assured, this committee will keep pushing aggressively on it. So thank you all very much. I really appreciate it. And certainly to our organization, DC Families for Safe Streets. When we talk with the director about where we stand with that rulemaking, we'll make sure we follow up as well, because I think obviously we'd benefit from your thoughts and feedback on it as well. So thank you all very much. Really appreciate it. And Mr. Wright, we'll follow up. If you can make sure we have your information, we'll follow up with you on that OAG piece too. All right. Thank you all very much. All right. Next, I'm going to move to the DMV Director, Gabriel Robinson. Director Robinson, good morning to you. And as always, we do our quick swearing in an oath before we get started. Then I'll turn it over to you to give your testimony for whatever you'd like. And then after that, we'll turn to some questions that we have. I know at times we have our AFO or others that might join to also just get sworn in. So we knock that all out at one time in case we need to pull anybody from the agency. Otherwise, we got to do it again later. So it's just easier to do right now. You can stay where you are. All right. Director, if you raise your right hand, please, do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give to the Committee on Transportation and the Environment is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, Director, it's good to see you. Let me kick it over to you for your testimony, and then we'll turn to questions after that.
Good morning, Chairperson Allen, members of the committee and committee staff. I am Gabriel Robinson, Director of the DC Department of Motor Vehicles, and I'm pleased to be here to testify before you today. On behalf of Mayor Muriel Bowser, we would like to thank our customers, Chairperson Allen, this committee, and the rest of council for your support. I would like to also congratulate the mayor and her administration for their extraordinary leadership and continued effort to revitalize the District of Columbia. I want to extend a special thank you to all my colleagues at DCDMV for their exceptional dedication and hard work. Team DMV continues to provide outstanding customer service to district residents. As I often say, we are truly saving lives every day. I am pleased to testify and provide testimony on Mayor Bowser's fiscal year 2026 proposed budget, Grow DC. With this budget, Mayor Bowser is continuing to strategically invest in the district's residents by generating new economic activities, creating new jobs, and increasing revenue to support city services and programs, including those at DCDMV, despite projected revenue shortfalls. The mayor's FY26 proposed budget supports DMV's mission to promote the safe operation of motor vehicles and public safety while providing outstanding customer service. Annually, DCDMV serves approximately 650,000 licensed drivers and identification card holders in the District of Columbia and 310,000 registered vehicle owners. Each year, we collect ticket payments for more than 4 million tickets. We interact with district residents and non-residents with an average of 3,200 daily customer contact, more than almost any other district government agency. In fiscal year 2025 to date, we have met the needs of more than 180,000 customers across our 4 service center locations. The agency has also processed and mail products generated from more than 270,000 online transactions. Additionally, we have conducted nearly 270,000 in-person, online, and mail hearings and over 11,000 hearings virtually. In FY 2025, we have inspected more than 97,000 vehicles, including approximately 9,500 conducted at our self-service OBE kiosk at Tacoma Rec Center and more than 1,000 at Fort Stanton. We have titled and registered more than 37,000 vehicles to date this fiscal year and issued more than 75,000 identification card credentials, including driver's license and non-driver's IDs. Now let me briefly describe DMV's proposed budget and projects for the upcoming fiscal year. DMV's FY26 proposed operating budget is $70,784,623, which represents a 2.2% decrease from our FY25 approved operating budget of $72,384,773. The proposed budget is comprised of $62,390,000 in local funds and $8.4 million in special purpose revenues funds. DMV's FY26 capital budget of $12,860,000 is allocated for the continued modernization efforts underway for our licensing and registration system, also known as Destiny, and our ticket processing center system known as eTIMS. In FY26 budget proposed by the mayor, she invests in critical programs at the DMV. Some of the things to note are funding shifts for multiple contractual services from SPR to local in the amount of $2.3 million in the face of decreasing revenue forecast. An increase in local fund budget of an increase to the local funds budget of $1.3 million across divisions to align salaries and fringe benefits with projected costs. A one-time increase of $317,000 to support inspection station consulting and $84,000 for vehicle services tags. In addition, an additional $9.5 million in capital funding for our Destiny Modernization Project, which has a new tentative release date of July 2027. Investment of $3.36 million in capital funding for our limited modernization of the ticket processing and adjudication system, also known as ETIMS. I would like to also take a moment to highlight some of the agency's FY25 strategic goals and accomplishments, many of which will continue into FY26. DCDMV joined 41, now 43 other jurisdictions in the state-to-state verification programs to electronically check with all other participating states to see if an individual currently holds a driver's license or identification card in another state. State-to-state also enables states to request another state to surrender or invalidate a credential. By participating in the state-to-state program, DCDMV also now have access to the nationwide driver history record functionality, which supports the concept of one driver, one credential, and one driver history in one state. The implementation of state-to-state also led to an increase in driver history accuracy and completeness, which ultimately supports DMV's mission to support the safe operation of motor vehicles and public safety in the District of Columbia. DCDMV had a 99.9% Real ID compliance rate across all active driver's licenses and identification card holders at the start of the Federal Department of Homeland Security's enforcement on May 7, 2025. This is one of the highest compliance rates in the nation. To enhance ticket information and alert to the public, DMV developed a communication outreach strategy aimed at increasing awareness of the enrollment of the ticket alert system, also known as TASK, by 10% by May of 2025. At the start of FY25, TASK enrollment stood at 116,500 accounts, a 10% increase at our target at 128,150 accounts. At the end of May of 2025, task enrollment reached 128,271, meaning we met our goal. In FY25, DCDMV added two new plates to its specialty vehicle tags. We are now offering the We Demand Statehood tag and Pride Lives Here tag. DCDMV continues to make improvements in addition to the agency's DMV continues to make improvements and additions to the agency's free mobile app, which allows you to conduct select DMV transactions from anywhere using a mobile device. We're seeing increased usage of our app with over 128,000 unique downloads and over 4,400 average monthly users this fiscal year. Customers completed roughly 40,750 transactions using their smart devices thus far in fiscal year 2025. We continue to encourage the public to use DMV's app with messaging through our Skip the Trip campaign. The mobile app is free and can be downloaded at Apple's App Store and Google's Play Store by searching DC DMV. DMV is working closely with Octo for the much-needed IT infrastructure and telecommunication upgrade at the DMV's headquarters located at 95 M Street, which serves as the nucleus for all DMV IT functions. The upgrade includes refreshing servers, switches, fiber optic cabling, and comprehensive foundational enhancements to ensure continuity of all DMV operations across all locations. In FY26, DMV will continue to produce marketing material to support the Ignition Interlock IID program, which has produced over 5 million impressions or potential views by reach across social media to date with the It Could Cost You More Than You Think campaign. DCDMV is proud to support Division Zero principles across the safe driving, associated with safe driving and fostering safer streets for all roadway users. We remain committed to enhancing public awareness and enforcing compliance with DC Code regulations through continued collaboration with our government agency partners and external media partners. DMV has drafted the proposed rulemaking for the Intelligent Speed Assist program, a device installed in vehicles which will actively engage to ensure compliance with local speed limits in alignment with the STEER Act. The rules identify the requirements for enrollment, potential violations, and provider qualifications. DMV has hired a program analyst with the hopes of having the first participants enrolled by October 1, 2025. DMV plans to fully implement the no ticket for stolen vehicles and plate provisions of the STEER Act by July of 2025. Working with our ticket processing vendor, MPD, DDOT, and DPW, we have programmed ETIMS, the ticket processing system, to automatically dismiss tickets to stolen vehicles and tags once we are notified by MPD. In closing, the resources allocated to the DMV will play a critical role in helping the agency to continue to provide outstanding service to district residents and all DMV customers. The council and this committee plays critical allies in this effort, and we appreciate your collaboration to ensure we operate efficiently and effectively. We look forward to working together to grow DC this fiscal year and beyond. Thank you for this opportunity to testify, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Director Robinson. All right, I'm going to dive right in. Start off kind of with some general operations and budgeting questions. And obviously, if I have any of my colleagues that join us, we'll switch gears into rounds of questions. As we're trying to look through this, it appears, but please correct us if we've seen this differently, that the major cut by revenue type that seems to be driving the reduction in the agency's overall budget is a special purpose revenue funding. And I want to try to make sure I walk through the SPRs, special purpose revenues for the DMV, just to help understand, will the DMV be spending less from FY26 and beyond? And what I'm trying to get at throughout is, are we going to see, or what are we going to see less in terms of services or modifications? So it appears the mayor's proposed budget sweeps about $400,000 each year across the financial plan for general O-type revenue sources. Can you help us understand, where does that money come from that's in that fund?
So the funding that is being moved about in SPR or O-type would be money in our inspection station special purpose fund. So the inspection station is one of the 3 special purpose funds that we have. It is the one fund that is experiencing some decrease in revenue. And so you're seeing some shifts happening in the budget. Now, the mayor, I think, very strategically did work with the DMV closely to ensure that we did not have a reduction in service. So as you see, our overall budget is a reduction of 2.2%. So it's not a huge reduction. I think all agencies are experiencing some decrease in some form or fashion. Ours is 2.2%. What you're seeing mostly in the budget is a shifting of the funds from the O-type or special purpose fund to local funding.
Couple of follow-ups there. In terms of what you've seen at the inspection station, you say it's brought in less revenue, kind of a general trend. Is that because we're seeing fewer vehicles that are coming through? Can you just expand a little bit on why you think you're seeing that trend over time?
Sure. So the inspection station special purpose fund collects in 3 different ways. It collects the normal inspection fee of $35 that individuals have on a routine every other year or every year, depending on the type of vehicle that it is. It also has re-inspection fees. So if you fail inspection and you have to go get a vehicle serviced or fixed in some way, and you come back later than you're supposed to, the 20 days that we give you, then there's a re-inspection fee. However, there's also a late inspection fee, which is where an individual does not come back in time. So there is a $20 per month fee associated with that. Where we're seeing the reduction is in that fee. So we're seeing people complying with the due date more.
That's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
That's right.
As such, that portion of the special purpose fund has a reduction in forecast.
Okay. All right. Well, that's definitely one of those things that actually that reduction is a good thing, because it means more people are in compliance. how does the agency use those SPR funds? So when those SPR funds are coming in, at least let's use the fiscal year that we're in right now, not looking at what's proposed. How do you use those funds?
So the funds collected in the inspection station special purpose fund completely operate or used for the operation of the inspection station and some other DMV services related mostly to vehicle and some other services. So the inspection station does not receive any local funding at all for its operation, $0. The money we collect at the inspection station is the money used to operate the entire operation, pay for the salaries, and it have seen over previous years some surplus, which we've also used that money to kind of help balance our local budget when we needed additional funding for different services. But now that there is a decrease in that late fee category of the inspection station, the mayor has made the shift of those things that are traditionally paid for by local dollars back to the local budget. So
Got it.
that's where you're seeing the shift of that, particularly the 2.2 million that you're seeing in table 2. That is that reduction. Those are traditionally special purpose services funding that were used for traditionally local dollar services.
Got it. Okay. And you outlined as well for folks, the fees like the $35 or so fee, the $20 late fee, things like that. When's the last time the DMV has changed those? Like, how often are you changing them, for example? So the $35 fee, has that been $35 for how long?
It's changed one time since I have been working at the DMV, and that's now 20 years. And so I don't know when last it changed, but it has changed once. It was $25 when I first started at the DMV. It's now $35. Of course, we're very cautious with that fee, not to charge more than we need to run the inspection station.
Got it. Okay. That's helpful though. Thank you. All right. In terms of how the agency would spend its money under the proposed budget, at least it looks to us like there's two primary adjustments. First is the agency's reducing its contractual services other line by about 3.6 million and increasing the other services and charges spending by about $1 million. What can you help walk through what's being accomplished with that reduction and enhancement between those two lines?
So sure. So you're seeing technical changes in the budget, not a large reduction. So when you see that line item for is 3.358% reduction in contractual services, what you're seeing is the reduction of the one-time funding that we received in FY25. So in FY25, the DMV received $2.303 million in one-time funding to pay for things like the IT infrastructure project that I mentioned in my testimony. That was $1.2 million. The ISA program Intelligent Speed Assist that this committee paid for, which was $868,000. And then also this committee also funded the no ticket for stolen vehicles in the amount of $250,000. So that is the bulk of the contractual services that we no longer have in FY26 that we had in 25. So that leaves a total amount of about $1 million in shift, and you see an increase in that in other services of about $1 million.
Got it. All right, that's helpful. All right, so we don't want people to look at that and say it's going to be less services delivered. Those were one-time contractual services, and those are just, it's the end of their lifespan.
Absolutely.
Okay. Mayor's budget proposes including $2 million of a reduction to the adjudication services department. I want to see if we can help, if you can help explain for us where those cuts are occurring. How do you feel like they would or would not impact the agency's operations? It looks like there's one FTE that's being removed. So I'm assuming the majority of this is in non-personal services.
So again, there is some shifting happening in that as well. So there is a proposal of some FTE reduction for hearing examiners proposed by the mayor. In fact, I want to say it's more than one. I believe it's two hearing examiners. But in any case, there is some reduction as well in the ticket processing contract as well, because as you know, many of the cameras that we've installed, the forecast is coming in, the actuals are coming in a little less than forecast. So as such, there's some reduction in the overall cost of the ticket processing contract, which is the largest contract the DMV has, which is over $16 million. And as such, you're seeing some modest reductions in that contract due to actuals not coming in as high as projections for ticket issuance. So the cameras are indeed collecting more revenue, but it's not as high as projected. So I think it is having an impact on people's driving. We just want it to continue.
Yeah. And to clarify that, is that related to the number of tickets or citations issued, or is that related to the amount of revenue collected on people who are actually paying those tickets or citations?
So the budget is contemplating what we pay for the contractual services, right? So what we're seeing
So-
is.
Sorry, I guess what I'm trying to get at there, to your point, is what you're paying for is the contract of the ticket issuance, not necessarily whether or not the revenue comes in or not. In other words, we all know this. We got a bunch of people in Maryland, Virginia who are not paying their tickets, and we have very few recourses. The Steer Act now allows the AG to go after some folks in court, but we just traditionally have not seen out-of-state compliance the same way we see in-state compliance with the actual collection of the revenue. So that's what I'm trying to get at is it that we're seeing fewer citations and tickets issued than projected in this? So that's the reduced contract amount, or is it because the actual revenues are less than we thought?
It's the amount of tickets.
Okay.
So the contract, the ticket processing contract is based on a per ticket issuance amount. And then that will help guide how much we need to set aside to pay for each ticket to be processed throughout the system.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, let me check for a second on some of our staffing issues. We've kind of had this conversation with every agency director. Obviously, in the springtime, on April 15th, the mayor issued order 2025-53 regarding the extraordinary measures to address the budget cuts that were imposed by Congress. Again, not of our own doing. This is Congress holding up our local funds. But one of the impacts of that included a hiring freeze on all executive branch agencies, which also included the DMV. So I wanted to spend a little time understanding some of the staffing issues which stand out in the mayor's proposed budget, but also understanding as of the agency performance oversight hearing that we had in February. So what was the guidance that the DMV got related to the hiring freeze? Was it just the mayor's order, or was there any additional guidance that the DMV got?
So the mayor's order was the overriding order that gave us our charge in terms of a hiring freeze. And there was a number of other freezes, travel freeze and other things. But in terms of personnel in particular, the hiring freeze was the big standout for us when it comes to staffing. So we were, frozen. If we did not have an official offer letter already extended, then it was frozen. Now, what that meant was of the vacancies that you see I have today, 18 of those positions were already interviewed and selected,
But that letter hadn't
but
come
I
out.
did not have a official offer letter because there's a process to get to an offer letter. You got to check, even after the interview, you still got to get background, you still got to get reference checks, you still got work to do, even though you know who you want to offer the position to. And that sometimes takes time to get people to get offer letters and residency requirements if they've chosen for residency. So there's work to be done. So 18 of my total vacancies that you see in front of you were an active recruitment, in many cases interviewed and selected, but not an official offer letter.
Right.
So that meant I had to stop.
Were you able to apply for an exception for those 18 positions, for example, or being granted any exceptions?
They are granting some exception, and I'm working through some of them. I just received an exception late last week on some. And so we're trying to see where we are and where we were in that process to see if we can jumpstart that, or did we lose the candidate?
Right.
Because candidates
They
aren't
got life
just,
to live too.
that's right. They're
They got
not
bills to pay.
just waiting. And so that's 18 of them. So I mean, while we're talking about it, I do want to say, so that's 18 of my total vacancies. There's another eight of those positions that was just recently vacated within like the last month or so. All right. And so the freeze also stopped us from continuing that process. So I need my positions, and I know there's been some conversations about some of the ones that have been vacant, particularly our hearing examiner positions. I do want to address that because, you know, I know some of them have long vacancy periods, but it's the nature of how we have to hire, all right? Hearing examiners are very professional individuals, and as such, I have to find the right candidate to do that work. We have put out for all of these positions 5 times since we received the positions when we expanded the ATE program at 5 different times. Even once I finish a recruitment and bring some in, I can't start again immediately because now I have a cohort where I need to train, you know, that cohort to get them to a certain level of independence before I can start another cohort. And when you're talking about a hearing examiner who must understand the statutes surrounding all the different various tickets that we issue, how to write a hearing record to make sure it can withstand pressure from an appeals board, Superior Court, and even the U.S. federal appeals here in D.C. We must withstand scrutiny because the ticket can progress all the way to the appeals court. So when I look at some of the questions I've received about my vacancies, a lot of it have been surrounding hearing examiners, but it's not, you know, that we're not in need of them and that we're not trying. It's the nature of looking for the professional that I need, needing time. Once I do hire a cohort of 5 or 6 that I'm able to get, I now need some months to train them to a level of independence before I can go out again. So, you know, and I can discuss pretty much all of my positions in that way, with that level of detail and specificity.
I know that you can. On the exception process, let me ask that, because I'm trying to make sure I understand with all of our agencies too.
Yes.
How, I mean, listen, a hiring freeze is just hard, right? Like to your point, you got people you were ready to bring on board, everything comes to a full stop. And then you just have the natural, like you mentioned, the positions that have recently become vacant. Naturally, you're gonna have some people, could be retirement, could be life happens, whatever it is. There's always a little bit of that just natural attrition that happens. So now we find ourselves further and further back because eventually this hiring freeze will get lifted and then you got to go. What's been the strategy you've looked at when requesting exceptions? Is it a position has been vacant for a very long time? This is a supervisory position? What are some of the ways you've looked at trying to help strategize around when and where you ask for an exception?
So right now it's based on my needs. A number of my positions that are vacant are in leadership positions, and I need my leadership, like my CIO position is one of those positions that was caught up in the selection.
Have you been able to get an exception for that?
I have gotten one for that as of late last week. Okay. So we're going to see where we are in that process. We may have to jumpstart it again. Yeah. But in any case, I look at what my needs are. The ones that I went after first were my leadership positions because I have service center managers, 2 positions that are vacant. I need leaders for those locations to make sure things are moving and operating seamlessly. So that was the first strategy, was to try to put my leaders back in place. I've only gotten one exception. My next, after I move on the ones that I just received, would be to go back and to look at some of my other needs in terms of frontline help.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. All right, so it looks like, but correct me if I'm wrong, as we look at the mayor's budget, you're going to be moving into FY26 with a total of 39 vacancies.
I hope not. That's how many I have right now. And I would say technically
on paper, that's what you got, right?
That's what I have today.
Yeah.
When I move into FY26, I hope to have less than 39. As of today, I have 39. I would really say 38 because 2 of those positions are half positions for my appeals board that I also need to hire, which I did get the waiver for that as well. And so I do hope to make some aggressive movement, at least on the 18 that I had. We're very close. Hopefully, if those candidates are still available, or the agency make a decision to move forward with what we selected, or do we want to move in a different direction? So I hope to move to 26 with FY26 with less.
Okay. And when the mayor took some of those vacancies,
Yes.
did they identify positions? For example, I know we've got one position's been vacant since October 2023. Did the mayor identify those long-term vacant positions as those to sweep, or was it just this is how many vacancies were going to be taken, and then kind of leave the director to help sort that out?
No, the mayor was very strategic and allowed the agency to be very involved in these decisions, which I very much appreciated because I and my team would intimately know where we might have places where we could take a cut. And so the mayor was very intentional, deliberate, and strategic about allowing the agency to work with her team to determine the cuts that she did propose into our budget. And so that's what you're seeing there is a collaboration of the mayor's team with the office and not just looking at a number or a date and going, well, you no longer need it because this has this date on it. I believe that is the wrong approach. And the mayor moved in such a way where the agency had input in that process.
Okay. There also looks to be 5 vacant legal instrument examiner positions. Are those positions you're looking for an exception? Were those any of those 18 positions, for example, you referenced?
No, because of those 5, one came vacant on April 7th, one on March 10th of this year, another one on May 4th of this year, and another one on April 27th of this year, and one on January 25th of this year. So all of those are relatively new move outs right at the time we started experiencing effects from the CR from Congress. Yes, we knew about the CR, was hoping that they would fix it right away, and thus we wouldn't have to take the move that we have, but we were moving in such a way to be cautious with our movement. But of those 5, most of them just left like less than 30, 45 days ago.
Okay. And would you categorize those? Actually, I don't know how many legal instrument examiner positions we have total. Would you categorize that though as that's part of just the normal attrition that you have, or was that related to the CR, or is there something related as to why you'd have those 5 in the last couple of months?
Well, most of those are just positions where individual was promoted, individual was terminated, individual moved to a different position. So it's just normal movement.
That's what I'm
about
getting at. There's nothing you attribute those 5 to something specific. It's more of that's just your normal. You got people, like you said, someone's gonna be moved, somebody will be terminated, somebody.
That's right.
Okay.
That's normal movement, but every single one of those positions are needed and necessary.
I expect you to say nothing less. All right. 2 positions related to the STEER Act implementation appear to be vacant, a program coordinator and 1 compliance specialist. The program coordinator position was moving, but a candidate declined.
That's
as
right.
well, I think. Since we know how vitally important it is to bring that intelligence speed assistance program online sooner rather than later, what is the DMV doing to facilitate hiring for those roles?
So 1 is filled.
Okay.
Right. So the analyst position, as you notated in my testimony, the analyst position is filled.
Is that when I say compliance specialist, is that the same as the analyst, or is this a different
So
position?
the compliance specialist is a different position in a different portion of the agency. So you're not seeing the program analyst is what the second position is called. That's not on this list. What you are seeing is the program coordinator, which we had made a selection, but they declined. We were hoping we had an individual from USAID that we were very excited about. And we lost them in negotiations. And so we have moved on to the second candidate. Thankfully, we had 2 candidates that we were excited about, but that was right when the freeze occurred.
Yeah.
So one of the waivers was also for that position. So we can go back and see if that candidate is still available and interested.
Got it. All right. That's helpful. All right. Is there anything from a DMV adjudication caseload that, as the hiring freeze, again, normal attrition, we find ourselves kind of further and further back? Is there anything that you're concerned about from DMV's adjudication caseload related to the hiring freeze and kind of what that just how that impacts your existing staff with a heavier and heavier caseload, or you're not seeing caseloads change too much yet?
Well, other than I need to hire the hearing examiner positions
Mhm.
that I have available, I don't have any concerns as long as I'm able to move on those that I have available.
Got it. Okay. Let me also look at it looks like we have 2 traffic adjudication appeals board positions that are vacant. That's
Yes,
where I'm looking at.
those are half positions, and
Okay.
that's what I was referring to before. So those are part-time
Mhm.
individuals. So they really count as one altogether. But we had made a selection on April 1st, 2025, and they were going through background. And there was another one on March 27th, 2025. Also, we're going through background at the time of the hiring freeze. So that's also on my waiver.
Mhm.
And I hope those candidates are still available so that we can get the second appeals board up and running.
Yeah. Are you able to reach out, or is your HR able to reach out to those candidates um, in advance of an exception request to find out if they're still available, for example?
No, we're not engaging the potential candidates until I have an approved waiver.
Yeah.
I don't want to. I don't want them to make decisions
Mhm.
that may not come through. So if my waiver is not approved, I don't want them to think the DMV called me. That means that this might be about to happen. Say it never happens, and then they don't take some other opportunity that they may naturally will want to take, so that they can provide for their families. So we are contacting them after we get an approved waiver.
Okay. All right. So the TAAB positions we were talking about would help us stand up the second appeals board. How are we doing on the appeals board that we've got in terms of um, do we have a backlog of appeals? What's the kind of the standard expectation around what our weight is if someone is making an appeal? Can you talk about what that looks like today?
Yes, so the numbers are increasing. So one of the reasons, as I like to explain, when you look at the numbers, just looking at the numbers that has been vacant isn't sufficient enough for the operation, because those positions have been vacant at the time of the report I have in front of me, 515 days. That's a lot, right? We received those positions at the time of the ATE expansion at the start of the FY24 budget on October 1, 2024, right? However, all the cameras for the ATE program had not been installed, and thus ticket issuance had not gotten to a point where that was a priority position for me to hire right away. And so I focused more on trying to hire the hearing examiners, which was an immediate concern. Now that tickets have gone from being 2.4, 2.7 million tickets a year to now 4.3, 4.2 per year, now I'm getting more adjudications that are coming in. And now as adjudications are coming in, people now want to appeal. So the numbers are increasing for my appeals board. We do have, I would say we're barely making our KPI in that regard. And if I don't get this other appeals board up and running soon, we likely would experience longer wait times for the appeal cases that come through the DMV. So I'm optimistic that now that we have the waiver, we'll be able to find candidates. Hopefully the 2 that we had already selected are still available, and at which time we can get them trained and up and running.
Okay. All right, let me switch gears for a moment. There is a annual report the DMV puts together on parking and traffic enforcement, so somewhat related to what we've just been talking about. It's due on June 30th each year, according to the statute. The last several years, at least, the DMV has been sending it a little after June 30th, sometimes several months. Is a DMV on track to get this year's annual parking and traffic enforcement report by the June 30th deadline?
We are working on the report. I can say the report goes through a number of vetting stages. And so it does at times get delayed on its submission to council, but it's not because it's not being worked on. It's because we're just trying to make sure that all the information is correct, because every number on those reports are moving targets. None of my numbers stay stagnant for more than the time that I say those numbers. As soon as I get up from this chair, every number on this report would have changed. And so it sometimes take time to track to make sure we're using the same numbers every time that everyone is satisfied with. So we're committed to making sure council receive the reports that it's supposed to receive timely.
All right, we got 2 weeks. It's June 16th. We got this.
It'll be accurate. We do know that.
We'd love it to be accurate and on time.
Yes.
All right, looking at the communications budget. Seems like there's a reduction of about $28,000 in the communication costs. It's a relatively small figure in the context of the whole agency. But I know the DMV does a lot of communication and does a lot of outreach. So what do we see the $28,000 reduction in? What am I going to see less of as a result?
I don't have a number for that. I can say if there's a communication need, I will work with my team to figure out what they need to make sure that we don't have a change in our posture. But again, a number of my programs took some cut, across the board just so that we can meet our mark reduction. But in the end, most of my communication is free communications. I have one of the largest newsletters that reach more than 450,000 people a month. I do have a captive audience that come into my service centers as they're preparing for their service. We have a very robust social media. Shout out to my communications team that's here. You're awesome. Also, I want to just say that, so we don't anticipate that you will feel anything that the public, but we may be crunching behind the scenes to make it work.
Okay. All right. So I hear you say you think you'll be able to find the efficiencies that the public's not going to feel that 28,000.
It's the government. We'll do more with less.
All right. Let me check to a different topic here. The ticket adjudication ombudsman. I don't think we've really talked much about that in some of our oversight hearings. I was more curious. The ticket adjudication ombudsman assists customers with help in navigating the adjudication process. The ombudsman is also responsible for assisting with complaints and concerns on the laws, rules, policies, procedures, etc. Sounds like a pretty substantial undertaking, and sounds like they'd be pretty busy with folks. I mean, just basing it off the number of constituent emails and calls we get for people that are trying to figure out how to adjudicate a ticket or appeal a ticket. How do you promote the existence of that ombudsman office so that people turn to them? Because I will say, at least on my side, is I think probably every council office is like this. We're on the receiving end of a lot of constituents who reach out about, hey, I want to adjudicate this, I want to appeal this, how do I go? So my constituent services team is pretty used to helping give people advice, help them make sure they turn the other side of the ticket over to read the information on there. But what is this ombudsman doing, and how are you feeling their ability to be? They also say they're supposed to be an independent and impartial person. How are they able to do all that?
Sure. So we do have a ticket ombudsman, and they too receive a number of requests for. So I must say a couple things. The public is aware of the ombudsman's office because they do get a number of requests. I'm looking at some numbers to say they have in 2024, they had over 1,900 inquiries within that office. We promote it through our website. So if you go to the ticket portion of our website, one of the first things you would see that we do have an ombudsman office. And so a lot of people utilize it, even on topics that, really the ombudsman is not, it's not really meant for, but they want to know, well, how do I get a copy of my ticket? How have I had a decision on my ticket? So as I look at a number of the things that they get, they're just general questions, as you've suggested. A lot of the information is on the back of the ticket. Sometimes it may not be, but the office also has a way to communicate back with the public. The individual reports directly to the director. And so I get to speak with them on a regular, consistent basis. They're out in the community. They go to ANC meetings. They do at least 10, sometimes more. And one of my last communications with the ombudsman is that we're exploring ways to try to get the public even more engaged with maybe some focus groups, just to hear from them what they think about the DMV services. And so we're looking at ways to just try to promote it more, but it's a very important office that the public uses on a regular and consistent basis.
Yeah, that's great. One tip that I would recommend, because I know we sometimes will do this with different agencies. For all the council offices, they'll do like once a month, the constituent services staff will get together with different agencies. Just kind of make sure that both from a staff to staff perspective, they know each other, they know these different resources. Could be a good idea perhaps to have the ombudsman be able to do kind of one of those meetings here at the council so the different offices get directly connected. So when we get a question, sometimes we know the answer, sometimes we can reach out and connect to the ombudsman. So
And I'm
happy to
happy
work with
to
you.
find ways to get it. I do want to caution that, I don't think any and all ticket questions should go to the ombudsman. So we do have a robust constituent service program that we use, that we communicate with senior leaders to every single constituent services office at the council. We definitely can do more with the ombudsman's office, but I don't think all adjudication ticket questions.
I don't think so either, but I think knowing when and when not is the appropriate time could be helpful. So just one idea. Happy to work with you and your team if you'd like to help make sure folks are connected on that.
Thank you.
Let me spend a second. I'm going to move to the STEER Act for a little bit. So you mentioned your testimony, the provision that's related to preventing tickets for vehicles that have been stolen should be implemented this summer. I think you said by July 30th.
Yes.
Okay. You mentioned in your testimony a little bit that was a lot of coordination and work between DMV, MPD, others, but it is essentially still contingent on MPD getting that information to the DMV, correct?
It's correct. MPD plays a critical role in the process.
That's where the report for stolen vehicles would go
Without
first.
MPD, this
yeah.
would not work.
Okay. So do you feel like that link has been made strongly such that if my vehicle is stolen, I report it to MPD, it's going to be getting to DMV same day? Or what is the kind of the expectation time?
So I don't have the minutia on it, but we will get it in
Okay.
relatively quick fashion. I would say that we are in the testing phase starting, I believe, this week, where the programming has gotten to a place where now we can test it out. And so that's where we are. So if it's not going to do what we expect it to do, then we will say we need more or faster. But we believe that MPD has been a great partner, as well as DPW and DDOT in these efforts, that we feel like we have a model that could work for vehicles that are reported stolen in the District of Columbia.
That's great. All right, thank you. Obviously, neither one of us wants a single vehicle to be stolen, but when it does happen, when you get that ticket in the mail afterwards, it's like salt in the wound. So I think this will help. So look forward to seeing that roll out quickly. When we look at the Intelligent Speed Assistance Program, you talked about in your testimony, the agency has draft proposed regulations. Have those been published yet? Or you're saying that's an internal draft of those regulations so far?
So it's not public yet.
Okay.
Those regulations are at the Office of the Attorney General for Legal Sufficiency. And then once they have returned back for legal sufficiency, it goes through one more internal review so that we can make any edits or changes that they may recommend or propose to us. And then, of course, it has to, at some point, go through a public process where it sits for the public to respond to.
Yeah. Okay. So even, I appreciate we're working to get this done. But even if we can get the OAG comments back quickly, like you said, then you got to make some adjustments based on whatever feedback you get. Then it's got to go out and get published. Then they get the feedback. We're still probably looking at the fall before it's actually final. So to me, this is something we want to get as fast as we can. I'm more than happy to reach out to the OAG and say, whatever comments you got, get them over to DMV fast, because we need to get this going. Is there any internal timeline you have about when you expect to be able to get this stood up then? Or is it still just kind of waiting for those boxes to get checked between the different reviews?
I mean, as I mentioned in my testimony, we're still targeting October 1st date of this year to go live. We feel that we have a model in place that we can build upon. So we're not starting technically from scratch, even though this is the first of its kind in the nation program. We're modeling this program similar to the Ignition Interlock program, which, does something slightly different, but still a device being installed in the vehicle. We've worked with the vendor community to find vendors in the area that can provide such a device. We've had demos. I've driven a vehicle with the device installed so I can see how it react personally myself. It was quite a learning experience to drive a vehicle that would not go more than a certain number, of driving, actively engaged. So
Well, I'm sure it was hard because you never go over the speed limit.
well,
So I know it was a foreign concept for you.
I mean, yes, I will not speak about me, other than I am a law-abiding citizen of the District of Columbia. Testing. Okay. So in any case, we are indeed working to facilitate this program. We have even worked with our, thankfully, I am on the board of the American Association of Motor Vehicles Administrators. This is a topic I put on the table to discuss at board meetings with them. That's how we also learned about so many other states are also looking at a similar program. They're looking to the District of Columbia to see what we're doing and how we're doing it. We've been meeting with our national partners and having discussions with AMVA, and they've been coming to the district to talk to us so that we can build a system that if other jurisdictions are going to do something similar, that we are all doing it, that the first jurisdiction that goes don't do something so radically different that other states can't accept it, because it's important that we do something very similar if Maryland, Virginia, or even other states do it, that we all are not just creating very unique programs just for our jurisdiction. So we've been working with AMVA. They've been great to work with and meet with, to come up with different codes that we may need to mark the driver's license, to transfer information, and ultimately, hopefully, to have some type of reciprocity program so that if you live in the district and move to Maryland or Virginia, that this will carry over with you if Maryland has such a program.
I think that's great. I appreciate the thoughtfulness going into it. I mean, I think that, yes, in an ideal world, especially being part of a region, that kind of reciprocity is getting traction. I know when I've talked with several of my colleagues as elected leaders in Maryland and Virginia, they very much are interested in this and want to be doing their own jurisdiction, and they're kind of watching to see how we do this.
Yes.
So I fully encourage and appreciate the thoughtful work that's going into it. I'll caveat that with not wanting the perfect to be the enemy of the good either. So making sure we're moving it forward, but I do think it's thoughtful to make sure you get that done. Let me turn to a different part of the STEER Act for a moment, and this is around our safe driving curriculum. So one portion of the law would essentially help create safe driving curriculum for drivers who want to offset about $500 worth in fines, who were otherwise required to do so as a conditional release or a towed or immobilized vehicle. I think you and I share this. Like, at the end of the day, what we want is safe driving. We want people to be operating, if they're going to be driving on our streets, we want them to do so safely. The FIS, when we passed the legislation, the DMV said they would need $3.5 million cumulatively over the financial plan to develop this. That would include 5 staff, systems changes to ETIMs. I want to try to help unpack it a little bit. The DMV already partners with an online traffic safety school, as I understand it, with various defensive driving courses that are accredited.
We do have partnerships with vendors that provide this course or a similar course. It is not the one that we envisioned for the STEER Act safe driving curriculum. I think the thought was that it would be a bit more robust to focus primarily on speeding and other requirements. So the ones that we have now are focused on pretty much everything driving, but the STEER Act seems to be focus a lot on trying to slow vehicles down, speeding, and those types of violations. And so the vision for that, if it was funded, was that it would be a program that is geared more towards the things that cause you to be subject to elements of the STARE Act in the first place.
Okay. At least as what I've tried to look at and see, the course seems to offer and cover traffic safety, applicable DC traffic laws, regulations that motorists are supposed to follow. I'm assuming it's updated, their curriculum's updated maybe every year or so as laws or regulations change. It seems to hit a lot of what you'd want.
Well, I'm not saying that it doesn't hit the elements.
Mhm.
It just hits everything that may not be subject to the STARE Act. So it may go through some information about provisional driver's licenses that, someone who have racked up $90,000 in tickets likely is not a provisional driver. And so you're going to hit everything whenever you go through just a general safety course, which may not be what we need as a targeted educational experience for someone who we know have been driving recklessly on the road via speed, red light, and other, things that we've captured through ATE. So yes, we're envisioning something that is more focused on speed and those elements more than a more broad DMV safety educational course.
Okay. How long does the more broad version that you're describing, how long does that usually take to complete?
I don't know that answer, but I'm happy to provide that if I don't have that answer.
I guess I'm trying, is it intended to be ballpark an hour? Is it like a half day type of experience or?
So whenever you're talking to vendors, they have, required material that they must cover. It's not necessarily a time requirement. It's a curriculum requirement. So I don't have a time. They have elements that they must cover.
Okay. I guess what I'm trying to get at, kind of following the theme of the perfect being the enemy of the good, feels like you've got a good partnership with an accredited kind of online safety program. I take your point about wanting to be a little more narrow and focused for a STEER Act component, but I also believe that somebody who's racking up thousands of dollars of dangerous driving is probably doing a whole bunch of other stuff and not following the law and not being safe either. So I don't want to be too narrow with it, but perhaps you kind of have the system that already exists, need some tweaking to kind of fine tune it for that STEER Act component. But I would probably rather us try to figure out how to use that program, narrow it if you think that's the best way to do to kind of bring it down a little bit, rather than create a different training program.
So point taken. So I would say that there's work that would still need to be done. I don't think that there's a curriculum out there that would, I think there needs to be some narrowing of the curriculum to focus on the things related to the STARE Act. I will also say the way that we use the system today, I still would need some upgrades and things to my system because the amount of volume that is going to change so significantly, right? I had my team just to kind of do some quick numbers to see, well, how many people would be subject to this point system curriculum today if it was alive and well. And just the number, just the day that I looked at it last week was nearly 17,000 people will be instantly, eligible if we were to go retroactive. And then that number would just grow every day as some person who may just be at the cusp of eligibility go and get another ticket and then runs into eligibility. So
I agree with you. There's a lot of dangerous driving out there.
So I have to consider the worst case scenario whenever I'm looking to manage a system, particularly in the beginning. It may get better as time goes and the consequences
people get safer.
Yeah, it may get better, but on day one, the first year, first 2 years, it could be a large number that I'm dealing with. And so the way I communicate with these programs would need to change because right now they email us the certificate when someone finishes. That would be impossible for me to manage that many people via email certificate. Like there will be work that would need to be done because right now it's limited in scope and that it's manageable. But whenever I throw on potentially 16,000 on one day and then it grows every day by another 1,000 or two, I won't be able to manage a system where someone is definitely need to be made aware of the dangerous driving that they are, that they are impacting others on the roadway. But also as they go through their consequences, that they are able to get their vehicle back before it's auctioned off. And so I don't want to be in a position where I'm not able to communicate with these schools the way I need to communicate more efficiently for a program of this size, scope, and volume potentially, and it doesn't work for the agency. So point taken, but I agree with you. We want to pass along the correct information to the correct audience.
Yeah. Okay. Let me try to ask a few questions too about the program to help waive fees for low-income drivers. What's been the result of that pilot thus far?
So that just started. I don't really have any real data on that in front of me to give today. I think it started on June 2nd. So I don't have any data on it. Now, the process was on June 2nd, the DMV started to provide notices to recipients of SNAP benefits to let them know about the program and the potential eligibility that they could get one ticket that is $100 reduced by $50. However, it wasn't an automatic thing that everybody who got the flyer inside of one of their tickets, it's a randomized selection. So we have a controlled blind population and study. And that portion of it is done by the lab in the mayor's office. And so I don't have any outcomes or results yet, but I imagine the next time I sit before you, I will likely have more information.
Okay. I guess it was announced months and months and months ago. So I did not realize it only just started 2 weeks ago.
The pilot started on June 2nd.
Okay. And just to make sure I wrap my head around this, it's not like people applied to it. They were selected on June 2nd. June 2nd was the beginning of any outreach to people about this kind of ticket forgiveness process.
So on June 2nd, individuals who are SNAP eligible were notified by us putting some type of flyer inside of their ticket notification, all right?
Okay.
That they could be potentially eligible. Then they would have to then apply to be in the selection, to get into the blind selection of it all. I mean, the lab probably can give a bit more detail about how they're doing the selection process, but the pilot started June 2nd.
Okay. So you had to link the DMV data to SNAP eligibility. Obviously, if you're able to merge those two things, so John Smith is SNAP eligible, I imagine some back-end work had to happen so that you have that data, because otherwise DMV wouldn't have that data in the first place,
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. DMV would not have that data. And so it is a collaborative effort, working with, again, the mayor's lab to determine how do we make that linkage between individuals who are receiving SNAP benefits and those who may have an eligible ticket that they could potentially contact the lab and apply to be in the blind study. And so the first notices went out on June 2nd.
Okay. All right. So the folks know that there's been work going on. So for the last couple of months, I'm assuming that's what DHS has been working with DMV so that so John Smith, you're able to figure out that person's a SNAP eligible person so that your data set, if they get a citation or infraction pops up and that person gets that flyer in the mail, so they have that opportunity to check to see if they're eligible.
Correct.
Okay.
Something similar to that, right? I can say there was work done behind the scenes to make sure that that connection was made between those people, individuals who receive SNAP benefits and those who also would have a potential ticket to notify them of the possibility of applying to be into the blind study.
Got it. Okay. So once they get notified, they have to take a step to apply to get into the blind study.
That is correct.
Okay. How's this working? I'm just trying to make sure I understand it. Because if I don't pay my ticket, for example, in 30 days, I'm going to see it double.
It doubles.
So how are we helping make sure someone's able to get that application in quickly enough? I'm assuming it doesn't double. If they've applied into the process, we have some kind of control system where it doesn't
So
double.
as I mentioned, we're trying to send them the notification with their ticket notice.
Mhm.
So when they get the ticket, they get the notice. Keep in mind, this is only for tickets that are $100. There are no parking tickets that are $100, right? So we're talking about an ATE infraction, which is mailed to you in the
Mhm.
mail. So when you get the ATE infraction in the mail, you get the notification of your eligibility to potentially enroll into the blind study.
But
The
I have
ticket
to
hasn't
take that
doubled.
step, right? I got to take that step to apply.
It-
And is there a hold essentially while I'm trying to find out if I'm
No.
actually eligible or not?
It explained the process to them that they have 30 days from the date that they receive their notice to act. Now they get the notice at the same time. So if you're interested in the program, you got to act within that 30-day period of time.
Okay, I guess what I'm getting thrown off by is you're saying they're potentially eligible for the program. So I'm trying to understand. They're getting something in the mail along with that citation that says you're potentially eligible. You need to take this step to find out, I'm assuming, if you are or are not eligible.
If they apply, then there's a hold on the ticket.
That's okay. Thank you. That's what I was trying to get at. All right. So we hold the ticket that way
If they apply,
if they apply and while that eligibility has been determined, they're not at risk of it doubling.
That's right.
That makes sense. That's what I was trying to get at. Okay, thank you. All right. And the lab is the one who's running this in essence.
So the lab is working with, the Department of Human Services, the DMV, and they're working to make sure they have a blind study. Now, I'll let the statisticians tell you what that means and how it worked, but in order to have a more, credible pilot, they want this to be a blind study as opposed to just a first come, first serve scenario, because I don't know if you learn as much from that process. So it is a blind controlled study, and the lab, yes, is running that piece of it.
Got it. Okay. Do we know how many people or how much? Well, it was $100. How much money did we set aside to test out this pilot?
So the pilot was set aside $850,000 set aside.
Okay.
For the payment of, I guess, the other $50. So 850,000.
Got it. And that is all for the ticket relief, or is that paying for example, I'm assuming you got
That's just
some of
the
the work
ticket
for the
relief.
data.
I got work for the data. I got funding to pay for all of my system changes I need to do to make sure the lab got the information that they needed. That was paid for outside of the 850. The 850K is just for ticket relief.
Okay. All right. I appreciate it. I'm going to move on to a couple other items here. Did want to note, just to help, since I got a note on this as well, when we talked about the STEER Act and the people being eligible for the points, the law is prospective, not retrospective. So while you may find 16, 17,000 people that it would apply to, it's only moving prospectively, not those people wouldn't on day one all of a sudden fall into that.
That's true. The number was really a point for me to try to figure out what the population would look like, right?
I hear you. I just want to make sure the public listening doesn't think like on day one, all of a sudden you got 16,000, 17,000.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Yep.
I was
You're
doing
helping the scope.
I got to try to understand what I'm dealing with and what I could deal with. So the only way I can learn to prepare is to look back, but understanding when it goes live is not retroactive.
I hear you. Okay. Thank you. All right. Looking at, let's see here. we talked a good bit about the education components, both your online program that you talked about, other pieces. I think you know I've talked about this before. We're going to focus on with DDOT the engineering side, right, of safer streets and intersections. We're going to focus on MPD and making sure they do the enforcement side. I know it's somewhat controversial, but any thoughts you have around, you know, every 10 years or so, I got to come in and do some mandatory training education when I want to re-up and renew my license?
So there isn't any thought at the moment for anyone that is not age 70 or more. Currently, if you're 70 or more, then you do have to get at least some doctor certification. And based on what we get back from that medical certification, we could require you to come in and do testing over again. But that's based on what the doctor says. If the doctor doesn't have any concerns that would impact the decisions I have to make as the director, then that may not be the case. But if they do, yes. So I understand the premise of the question, and I think it's a broader conversation that you know, we can have to determine what's the right time, what's the right if it should be done at all, given the nature of active driving, right? You're learning every day, even if conditions are slightly different. It's not one of those learning tools unless you don't drive every day. Most drivers drive at some regular cadence such that they are learning every day. So when we look at individuals who are speeding, we're not talking about individuals that don't understand the rule of speeding or not. So I don't want to impose a new rule just because it's, you know, it looks good that we do it. I want to do it because there's a difference that we're going to actually make. And I would love to find some empirical data, perhaps, that would suggest the individual who's speeding and getting $90,000 in ATE tickets don't understand that's what they should not be doing. I would care to suggest that that is not the case. They will also know you should stop at a red light, at a stop sign. So I want to make sure that if I do it, that there is an outcome that individuals are getting other than just another requirement they got to fulfill, but they're not learning. But I understand the premise of the question. I think it's something that I would like to take back to my colleagues at AMVA at our next board meeting to just see what the global community thoughts are. Are there some current standards out there that I can kind of sink my teeth into and maybe make recommendations to the mayor? But I'm open to that conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You have talked about it before, you know, I think you understand where the premise is coming from. I mean, I think the last time I took a driver's test was when I was 16 years old. So I hope I've learned a lot since then, but I've never had to be tested on it. And obviously the laws have changed, the rules have changed. I hope my driving has gotten better, but I also know we've got a whole bunch of people whose driving seems to get a lot worse over time. So it could be an idea. Welcome it. The conversation is not on the table today. Let me turn to spend a little bit of our moments together on the IT upgrades and our capital budget.
Yes.
So in the budget we have before us, it looks like there's a $13 million enhancement in the proposed budget supporting upgrade and replacement to Destiny and our ETMs system. What I'm trying to make sure I understand, it looks like under the capital line, we have an unspent balance of about $5 million for the Destiny capital project. How much more is the 18 million the total of what's needed for Destiny itself, or is that a combination of Destiny and ETIMs and other IT?
So the money that we are referring to, so the mayor has proposed $12,860,000 for capital improvements. And if we were to break that down, 9.5 million is for the additional money for Destiny modernization, and 365 is for ETIM's modernization, which is the ticket processing. So Destiny has transferred all the funding that I have today to my contractor, right? But my contractor is Octo, right? So the money still sits on my book as they are expending the funding. So you see funding that they're expending today, and that they will expend much of that $5 million that you still see on the books, as they're drawing down right now. They may not have even journalize all of their expenditures against the project that we have on our books. So that's why you do see the funding. Destiny needs at least another 18 to 19 million to be completed. But given, our budget restraints, the mayor has funded it for next year. So that I have the funding to continue and we don't lose all the investments that we've been doing now for years. Because if the project stop, I lose all the contractors and all the people that now know my system and know what we're trying to do, and hard to fill positions in the technology world. They're all on the team. If we were to stop funding, then all of that would potentially be lost, or it would take me even years to gear up again if I was to get the funding, say, a year later. So the mayor proposed the 9.5 million to keep us going for FY26. I will likely have another line item just like this, 9.5 in FY27's budget, which would be the last year for the Destiny modernization project. So, but she funded it for FY26.
Okay. So we think the total, so if I have 9.5 million plus my 5 million I have, so we're at 14.5. Is it going to need another 18, 19 million on
No,
top of that? Or that's the total?
It's the
is 18,
total for
19?
Destiny would be the 18, 19 million. So you see a 9.5 allotment
Yep.
for FY26. DMV will be making another proposal to the mayor in FY27's budget for another 9.5 allotment to conclude the project. That's the
Okay.
Destiny modernization. Now, in this budget for FY26, there's still another 3.65. I can tell you the exact number, 3.36 million in this budget. That is for the ETIM's process, which for ticket processing and for my adjudication hearings. So that system is going through a process of trying to get on a multi-year contract with our vendor, and we're requiring certain upgrades in the system in that multi-year process. So the first year of that multi-year contract would be 3.36 million for the first year of enhancements. And then next year, I think it's like 1 point something million to conclude the modernizations we're asking for in that system.
Okay. I mean, I think you share the frustration as well about how long it's been taking Destiny to get upgraded. I feel like we've talked about this probably at every oversight hearing and every budget hearing to get this thing done. It's a mission critical system.
Absolutely.
But it's painful how long it's taken.
Well, I do want to say it has been a while, but modernizations of a system of this size does take a while. This has always been contemplated to be a multi-year project because we're talking about touching every element of one of the largest IT systems in the District of Columbia that will be moving from a mainframe system to a web-based operation system. It is huge and it's a vital system. I will say, in addition to the reason why we're talking about it beyond what we thought would be this year, is because we continue to grow the current system in its capacity today. So when I look at things that I've had to build into my current mainframe system and also build it in the new system so that it's ready when we go live, I have to look at things like the ignition interlock device, which was a necessary program, but I had to build it twice, one in the old system, one in the new system. That wasn't in the scope when we originally thought about what it would take to modernize Destiny. The secure credentials, the new driver's license and ID cards, brand new, was not in the scope. I can go down the list of about 20 things that we have added. So I'm not looking at and calling this a delay. This is an extension because of the additional things that we've already added and benefit from today. Another thing would be the ISA program. Wasn't contemplated at the time that this funding was given to us, but yet I have to build it in my mainframe system and in my new system. So when I do go live, those new things that were never contemplated in the scope are already in the system. And I have a list of things that we've had to do front and back.
Mhm.
And
I mean,
so
that's
this
the
is
nature of a system, right? Like,
exactly. So
the longer it takes,
I just
all
want to
things add up to
corral
it.
the frustration in terms of meaningful work that has occurred over the years of extension.
My frustration is not that there's not meaningful work going on. I know there is. And I think you actually are equally frustrated.
Oh, yes,
You'd
I'm
like to see
ready.
this thing done,
I'm
right?
ready.
So, so the frustration is not a criticism. The frustration is just we know this is really, really important. We know a lot depends on it. We're going to fund it. We got to get it done. It's a little painful,
Yes, I
to how
agree.
long it takes. All right. And then you talked about the ETIM system as well. So this one, so in FY24, the mayor had reduced some of the budget authority here. Now we're putting some of it back.
Yes.
The funding you talked about, there's an additional 3.5 million in the FY26 capital budget. Do we think that's the totality of what's needed for ETIMs, or just like Destiny and FY27, there'll be an additional capital request coming?
Yes. So the mayor did reduce the total budget for capital projects for ETIM, I believe, by $17 million in last year's budget. This particular contract has just a long evolution of changes. We've talked a lot about this contract over time as well. And what we're looking at is a change in strategy that has occurred here. We are looking, as I've suggested already, to move into a long-term contract with our vendor for this program. What we also have decided is that this would be a moderate modernization, not a full modernization. So once we got a grip on the things that we knew were must-haves for us, because we understood we couldn't get everything that our initial proposal had, which prompted the mayor to give us the 17 million in capital dollars in the first place. But once we got our bids in, we realized the market just could not give us what we have because of the unique situation of us acting as a city, state, and county all wrapped in one, and no vendor does what we really wanted. So we looked at this again to say, what are the things that we just must have in terms of modernization? And so the cost is much different than what it was. So once we got a clearer picture of what we thought we could get from this modernization effort, we got a new rate. So the 3.36 is what we anticipate spending in FY26 on a new multi-year contract. I think the next following year is like 1.1, 1.5 million to complete the modernization that we asked for. So it'll be a much smaller number in FY27.
Got it. All right. Let me move on to a couple other items. We've talked about this a few times about electronic credentials.
Yes.
This issue keeps coming up for us. So we talked about this at our February performance oversight hearing and in years past. So this was the law was passed, the DMV Electronic Proof of License Permit Identification Card Amendment Act of 2021. Funds were sufficient through FY25. This fiscal year to implement the bill, law enforcement, including MPD, authorized and able to accept the digital driver's license IDs with no additional costs. Looks like Maryland and Virginia have already done this. Where do we stand with this?
So I'm happy we're talking about this again. So the bill that you're referring to gives DMV the authorization to issue. And so there was no funding requirement. So the fiscal impact statement, I think we talked about this at my performance oversight, that there wasn't a fiscal impact. That's because the bill, as we went back and looked at it again, gave us the authorization to issue a credential and for MPD and other law enforcement entities to accept it, but it was not an implementation bill. It was to give us the permission that if we got to a point where we were ready to do it, we could do it. Because if I didn't have that passed, then, law enforcement could not accept a mobile credential, nor could I issue one. But it's not a mandate of implementation. And so no funding came with that bill. Now, that doesn't mean that the DMV hasn't been working, as I suggested in the performance oversight hearing. We are very interested and have been doing work behind the scenes. Digital credentials are going through an evolution of changes right now. It's exciting. The district wants to be in that conversation, but funding will be necessary in order for us to get into that arena.
All right, but I mean, not my first fiscal impact statement. Usually agencies will say, this is how much it will cost to do. Virginia and Maryland already did it. How much did Maryland have to pay for
I
it?
have no clue.
How much did Virginia pay?
I have no clue.
How much would it cost us?
I'm sure there was an investment. Our cost for our initial implementation will be near $2 million.
Where did we come up with that number from?
That's from us working with our potential vendors, not what Maryland and Virginia necessarily are doing, because contracts are usually based on economy of scales. And so I can't just look at what Maryland or Virginia does, because it may not give a clear picture for me, given the population density and sizes, nor would their contract have been negotiated the way that mine are. So I know that they have one. I'm very familiar, again, sitting on the board of the American Association of Motor Vehicles Administrator. I'm very familiar and involved with it. However, every jurisdiction that has one have made an investment in the process in order to do it right, to do it safely, to do it secure. There are things that must happen. I believe the district, we can get there once the investment has been made.
So have you worked with the CFO's office to get us an updated FIS if you think there's a $2 million cost?
Well, at this point, I don't need a FIS for that statute or regulation. I don't need a FIS for that. I need an enhancement to my budget.
Okay. Did you make a request for this enhancement to the mayor
I have made requests.
for implementing this?
I have made requests.
Just be specific, for implementing this law.
Yes.
Okay.
But not to implement this law. The law, as I mentioned, the law gives me permission to issue. It doesn't give me
We're
a
kind of getting into some
requirement.
wordsmithing here. So you have requested an enhancement to be able to implement digital IDs.
Yes.
Okay. We did a pilot, didn't we, back in 2016, 2017?
Yes.
And what did we learn from that pilot?
Well,
At this point, it's a few
I
years
mean,
ago,
it's
but
so old that the technology is completely different. The company that we did it with doesn't exist anymore. But we learned that there is a demand, that it is possible to work. But what digital credentials look like today looks nothing like what that pilot did back in 2016.
all right. I just think we're getting lapped on this one. I mean, I can have a digital credential for just about everything, except for this. And when our neighbors in Maryland and Virginia have it, it feels like we're not moving forward for a reason I can't quite understand or comprehend.
Well, I do want to be clear. Virginia is just getting into the market. They've not been there. Maryland is one of the first, but their test case has only been to use it at airports. Right now, it's a test case and they're using it. So we're not so far behind that we can't catch up. And we're not so far behind that we can't learn from other jurisdictions' mistakes. I mean, we oftentimes have the Maryland DMV director, I know her personally, to talk about what I wish we had known, and that these are the things you need to know before you do it, so you don't have the same pain points we have. But their test case model is not expensive at the moment. So really, it was a TSA experiment that they were the first kind of big test case used for these digital credentials. It is starting to expand into other different things, but it's not quite there yet. All laws still requires you to make sure that you have, even when you have a digital credential, that you must still also have the physical credential on your person. That's even in our statute that was passed. So we're not so far behind that we can't catch up. And our friends in Virginia, I know their director as well, Gerald Lackey, that they're just getting into the business. I think we can catch up once we identify the resources necessary to do so.
All right. Let me turn to another topic. This is in the Budget Support Act. Title V, Subtitle F is the Distracted Driving Safety Amendment Act of 2025. So we had asked the DDOT director about this as well. But does the DMV have a specific position on this? Is it all a DDOT related issue? It seems to be that this is necessary for some type of eligibility for federal grant dollars.
So it sounds like a DDOT initiative because most of our federal grants flow through DDOT when it comes to roadway safety. They're the agency that is recognized mostly by the federal government for roadway safety grants. In fact, the grants that I have today that I'm working on all are from the federal government, but came through the Office of Highway Safety that sits inside of DDOT.
Right. And I think that's what this is that this is a through the highway or state highway safety office would be eligible for grant dollars for distracted driving. But we're trying to make sure we understand it's some type of dedicated traffic safety unit. And it's unclear if that is DDOT working with MPD. Is there a role for DMV? Has that been a conversation around this particular BSA subtitle? Or
currently there's no role for the DMV that I'm aware of, but we do work closely with the Office of Highway Safety. Again, we have grants with them today that we're working on a number of projects, all federal grants. But in terms of the provision that you're speaking of now, I'm not aware of any DMV's responsibilities.
Got it. Okay. Lastly, I noted in your testimony, the We Demand Statehood plate is out.
Yes.
Glad to see that. Don't know why that design took so long to get approved, but I'm glad it is. I'm glad that we've got a lot of other plates out there too.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, I hope we see some out on the road. All right. I don't think I have any other questions at this time, Director. I know we can follow up with you and your team between now and, well, I guess next week when we have our committee markups, because it's all moving fast.
Yes.
So I appreciate it. And thanks to the DMV team for being here as well. And again, we'll follow up with anything in addition. So I want to thank you for your testimony today, Director Robinson. I want to say, obviously, the work the DMV sometimes might be mysterious or innocuous to many others. It actually is a pretty key pillar of our traffic safety. And I think that's a big part of why we have been trying to partner with you and your team. Hard to talk about Vision Zero and actually achieving it if we're not talking about the DMV and the role that you play within all of that. I want to thank our public witnesses for coming and testifying as well. And again, I know some of it was related to DMV, some of it's some of our larger issues that we all want to work together on and making sure that we're focused on that. So we'll follow up with them as well. And I look forward to getting those proposed regulations out soon for the Intelligent Speed Assist. So this is going to conclude the committee's budget oversight hearing on the Department of Motor Vehicles. The record for today's hearing is going to close this Friday, June 20th, 2025. The committee will accept written testimony through the council's hearing management system, which can be found on the council's website at lims.dccouncil.gov/hearings. The next meeting of the committee will be on Wednesday, June 25th, where the committee will mark up the FY26 budget report, which will then be advanced to the council's committee of the whole for further consideration alongside the council's other committee actions. The committee also anticipates marking up several nominations to the DC Water and Sewer Authority Board of Directors at the same time. So there being no further business before the committee, the time is now exactly 12 o'clock noon, and this budget oversight hearing on the Committee on Transportation and the Environment is now adjourned. Thank you.